so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris for a deep dive demo on our accounts payable process and how we handle it.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Go ahead and steal the screen from you. Good. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. Should be my Celigo home dashboard. So within Celigo, integrator.io, that is our integration platform. This is our product. And so from here, we can really see and view, manage, create different integrations into and out of our tech stack. And so what we're going to talk about today is our vendor payment manager. And then I'll also touch on some other ways that we can help incorporate automations into your AP process. So working with, different supplier portals potentially, or other software applications that work inside of that accounts payable space. So within Vendor Payment Manager, what we're doing here is taking payment files that are generated out of NetSuite, and there's a few different ways we can go about that. So either using the native NetSuite tool to generate a payment file. So it could be positive pay file, EFT files, Nacha, CTX type files as well. We take those files, pull them out of NetSuite, and then send them over to your bank. So your bank will then process the funds according to the instructions within those payment files. So this really assumes that you've got those pieces of NetSuite set up on the accounts payable side of things. So you have your vendor record set up, you've got bank account information, routing information, all set up on those corresponding vendor records, and then the corresponding payment module that would actually create those payment files. And then, like I mentioned, there's other ways to pull that information out, such as safe searches that can be written in NetSuite to pull that information out and essentially generating a CSV file off of that export and then sending that on over to your bank as well. All of these integrations, they run on a scheduled basis. So this would be maybe as far as according to your process, however often you need this to run. If you're doing your payment runs once a week, once every 2 weeks, something like that, we can set that schedule up accordingly to just kind of look into NetSuite, check to see if there's a new payment file. If there is, we'll pull it. If not, we won't pull anything for you. And from there, it also will just make sure that your team doesn't have to log into different bank portals. So if you are banking with multiple banks, a lot of companies running NetSuite are, especially when you're getting into the one world multi-subsidiary type environments. A lot of times you'll have multiple subsidiaries with different banks. Not all of them will always share banks. Typically, it makes this process a little bit easier if they do. But again, we can work with multiple banks if you do have that kind of scenario. Up here in the top right, we would be able to separate out each of those different banks to their own little section. And then you can configure the rules differently per bank, per file, per flow. Now, from a user standpoint, really, this is all behind the scenes. This is not something in a day-to-day fashion you would need to log into and make changes. Typically, in this kind of land of our pre-built integrations, you set it up, you configure it, and then it's going to run in the background. You won't need to jump in there unless you get a notification that, hey, maybe the bank server went down or something like that. Then you'll want to reach out to the bank to make sure you can work through that with them. But from a user standpoint, what that would look like is actually inside of NetSuite. So if I just pivot really quickly into our NetSuite ERP, part of this pre-built integration includes a bundle install in your NetSuite account. So that's essentially going to create all the different areas that will leverage this tool. And so from here in our ribbon, we get a new dashboard that is added to that ribbon. So I can actually see the data inside of NetSuite. Now, as I pull this dashboard up, it is Celigo branded, but fundamentally it's still NetSuite. So if we look at the URL, we can see that. Again, if you are working through multiple banks, you would be able to separate those banks out and filter the results out accordingly. I'm going to pull up a rather large start and end date, but again, this is something that you would run more so on like a weekly basis just to see what you're pulling as part of those payment batch runs. And then if you load the transactions, you get a view into how many of these files we were able to pull for you. So within each of these payment files, you're going to have multiple payments, right? Lots of payments that would make up that corresponding batch file. And that's what we're saying here. We were able to move for you. So we're able to pull this information from NetSuite, sync it to the bank. We didn't run into any issues. And what we can also see here is a link over here on the left to a corresponding record. So as part of this bundle install, not only are we creating that really nice dashboard to see all that information at a glance, but we're also creating custom records that make up that dashboard that you can then use things like safe searches to write the reports against these anytime they get created. So say you want to be notified anytime this checkbox of success is not checked, so it's marked as false, or if this error field is not empty, so you can be presented with that information in a timely fashion. You can then throw that as a reminder on your dashboard. You can email recipients from the results within that safe search. It's really just about how you would configure that. But ultimately, because we create all this for you as part of that install, you're not going to have to go in there and configure these or change them around. It's something that comes out of the box, off the shelf, to help really just kickstart that process for you. And so from here, that's, in a nutshell, what the vendor payment manager is going to do. It's scheduled to pull those files out of NetSuite, post them to your bank, automate that process. So again, you don't have to download them, down to your machine, import them into your bank portal, log in, log out, that sort of thing. So it just helps reduce the amount of back and forth that your team would have as it pertains to moving those payment files to the bank and making sure that you're paying vendors on the basis that you need to be. Now, in addition to moving just things like payments and payment files, again, Celigo it's a holistic integration platform. So there's different ways that we can fit into working with your accounts payable motion. So if that's connecting, like I was saying, to something like a supplier portal, or if they're working with something like an SAP Ariba, where you want to sync purchase orders out of NetSuite and sync those over into the business network commerce purchase orders, that's something you can do as well. We also have our tool Flow Builder, which could take something from NetSuite and post that really wherever you like. So these universal adapters could be used, again, to access some kind of supplier portal if you need to have that information synced back and forth. At the end of the day with Celigo, it's really just about making sure that there's programmatic ways for us to get and interact with that data. So as long as there's some form of web connectivity through any of these various universal adapters, we're going to be able to interact with that application, no problem. So again, if there's other pieces, also getting into the world of, EDI, contract manufacturers, we do work with those very heavily as well, those kinds of use cases. So again, if that's something that rings a bell for you or is a pain for you in terms of handling with getting, materials in, or just essentially working with vendors to make sure that you have good relationships with them, you have a seamless interaction with them, we can definitely help automate a lot of that process. All right. And with that, Michael, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks so much for that. That was great. And I'm sure our viewers got a lot of value from that. So thank you for that. So with that, I just want to remind you that we're in the second part of our finance automation web series. And we have multiple components to this. So we have accounts receivable that's coming up next. Then we have procure to pay process, and then building a frictionless expense management process. So we really encourage you to come and join us in this webinar series. We'll also be giving these out as a recording for you to play back and maybe kind of do a deeper dive and be able to kind of analyze the demos in a little bit more granularity. But really encourage you guys to be able to come and join us for these. And so with that, what I'm going to do is just kind of see if we've got any questions in the chat box here. And okay, let me see. Okay, this is definitely one for you, Chris. So does this support PGP encryption?
Yes. Oh, great question. Yeah. So a lot of banks are going to require that to essentially connect to their servers. So being able to store those private or public keys is something that we can help with at the onset of setting up that connection to your bank. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then we've got one more question. And then if anybody does have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If we can't get them to now, we'll follow up directly with you. How many banks does this support?
So, I mean, that's a good question. So, really, I mean, we can support as many banks as you like. I mean, for us, we're just looking at how many connections we're making. So that would factor into, things like the licensing and working with our team to make sure you're in the right group. But I would say typically it's not going to be anything more than 2 or 3 banks, depending on, again, your subsidiary structure and how many banks you're working with. But a lot of times, with companies I've worked with, it's either 1, could be 2, or, maybe as many as 3. But really we can accommodate whatever use case you have there.
Got it. Okay. So we've got a lot of flexibility in that part of the solution. And again, talking to that scalability element of it. Well, I think that's what we have for now. Again, thank you so much to everybody for being able to join in this webinar. We really appreciate it. We hope that you're going to come and join us for the others. Chris, thank you so much for your time. As always, great demo. And we hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone.